Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Dirt podcast. Today we're going to be jumping into episode number 6 and talking about our temperature monitoring and our trout and trout streams that we have here in Howard County. And a lot of times when people think about trout streams, I know myself in particular, I think about northeast Iowa, southeast Minnesota, and kind of into Wisconsin there. And not always people understand or know that Howard County actually has a number of trout streams as well. Some known, some unknown, but nonetheless, it all kind of has a lot of things to do behind the scenes to either A, develop or create a trout stream, or B, get a cold water stream sustainable with a certain population of trout and stuff. And so that's kind of why we wanted to lump the trout and the temperature monitoring together, because that is a big part of it. And so something that we use in our office and work with the Iowa DNR, we use what they call thermographs. And these thermographs are basically temperature monitors that we're able to put in the stream. They're small units. I would say they're, what do you think, size of a small Pringle, I guess you could say.
Yeah, about the size of a quarter in diameter. Not very thick.
Yeah, so they're pretty small units. We basically put them in a housing of a PVC, attach them to a piece of rebar that we've driven into the stream bed, and that way it's not moving. And then try to find a fairly deep spot so that we know we're going to have water flow over it the whole entire time. Because obviously, if it gets out of the water, then all of a sudden, instead of measuring water temperature, we're measuring air temperature. And so we always need to make sure that we're able to create a consistent data set and make sure that we get the numbers right as much as we can. And so these units are pretty awesome. We actually last year went and purchased a bunch ourselves, so that we actually have two temperature monitors at every site that we have planned right now, to hopefully lure out all the errors and don't have monitors dying on us or getting buried or whatever it is, and so that we hopefully have that consistent data over the years, so we don't have any lag years and that sort of thing. These monitors are pretty impressive. They basically take a small watch battery, and they're able to last throughout the whole summer when we put them in there. And they take a data point or a temperature point every 10 minutes. And so we're keeping a continuation of that trout or that water temperature the entire time, which is really important, because obviously as the day warms up, it gets warmer. As the night comes, the water cools. And so that's really important for us to, and that actually gives us an aspect how to tell the warm water from the cold water, because the cold water streams are going to stay pretty much the same throughout the day. Where you get those warm water streams, a lot of times they have a dark substrate with some sediment or whatever, and those are starting to have those peaks through the middle of the day and whatnot. And so these temperature monitors are really important, and they're very small units, but yet they pack a pretty good punch and give us a lot of information really quick. And so I kind of alluded to why we use them, obviously to hopefully get down the time frame and get into the trout stream era. Basically, the main point of it is we want to make sure these streams, or try to get these streams actually designated cold water streams, and so get them on that actual list, get it in writing. The data that we're finding are showing that a lot of these streams are cold water. It's just a matter of time of getting enough years of data, seeing the different vegetation out there and stuff. And so there's actually certain parameters that you have to meet to be designated cold water. And to be a designated cold water stream, you from mid-May to mid-September, you can't have a maximum temperature over 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And so a lot of these streams are well under. And so this is you need to have that data for 3 years. Doesn't necessarily have to be consecutive data or consecutive years. We have to have 3 years under normal flow showing that that water temperature is under 75 degrees. You can't have any maximum temperatures over 75. And then with another part of that is you have to have a certain flow regimen. So you have to have 0.3 cubic feet per second, which doesn't seem like a lot. It isn't a lot. So you have to have basically what we would say is a base flow. You have to have some sort of flowing water. Obviously, you got to have water there for the trout. You can't just have a dry run here or there, disappearing streams and stuff like that throughout the year to sustain a healthy trout population. You got to have that flowing water year round. Some other things to kind of take into account is So there's cold water designations, there's warm water designations, but then within each one of those, there's different classes that they break it down into, and those are basically broken down into the interaction of recreation parts of it, fishing capabilities, locations, and that sort of thing. And so, for example, I mean, they have, like, as a cold water stream, you maybe have your class A1 would be your primary contact recreational use, is what they call it. And so that's where you're going to have direct contact with fishermen, with boating, jet skiing, skiing, people swimming, that sort of thing. You're going to have direct contact in the water for long, sustainable times. If you get into that class A2, now you're starting to, they call it a secondary contact recreational use. And so maybe that's your indirect use. You're not in the water as much. There's still fishing capabilities, but not quite as much as the class A1. And so they have those different kind of breakdowns, and we won't go through all of them. But then kind of the other part of it where, say, there might not be recreational fishing use, that gives it another sort of cold water designation. And so that's when you have your cold water aquatic life. They have a type 1 and they have a type 2. And so those are still cold water stream designations, but they're just another breakdown per se of what class they are. And so that's just kind of how the DNR can kind of specify what kind of stream it is. And I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to assume that this is probably how they prioritize as far as trout stocking, how often they stock it, the promotion of it, probably some sort of management, how much money they're going to spend, that sort of thing. And so that probably gives them a pretty good priority list as to whether it's a high quality cold water stream or a little bit lower quality cold water stream down the list, and that sort of thing. And so it's a lot kind of like how we can classify projects here as far as high priority projects or low priority projects, depending on what we're talking about and stuff like that. So like we say, we got to have these, collect all that data. We got to be able to hopefully work down the road of getting a designated cold water stream. And what that does is then it basically opens the door for a few different things. The main part of it is it opens the door for us for projects and practices that if they're designated cold water stream, it gives them priority points basically then. And so some of our different stream bank stabilization project pools or pools of money will get actual priority points if it's in a designated cold water stream. Another kind of sub benefit of that, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, is, and it doesn't necessarily have to be designated cold water, but if we got that data showing that we have those cold water, you can see the habitat out there, they can then go down the road of putting some trout in. And that's really the ultimate goal on a lot of these streams is hopefully getting some trout in there and sustain some healthy populations. And that's what we're doing here in a lot of different stretches. So there's a lot of different things that go into the temperature monitors and putting them in and different things like that. But when we get down to the nitty gritty of it, we're always looking to see those temperatures down there in the 60s and see that water crest and different macroinvertebrates and stuff like that out there, which is just a couple different surveys that we do. And I mean, Neil, he's done quite a few of those macroinvertebrate studies, and they're pretty fun to go on and be a part of.
When talking about these, putting these monitors in, I think, what do I have, like 6 in my watershed? Mm-hmm. And how many do you have in the turkey? 8. So we're putting out, 14 of these. So what we're doing is we go out and we drive a steel post into the stream bed. Like Hunter said, we try to find those locations that are going to have a good flow and the correct depth of water, because we want it to set above the sediment, but yet below the water. So sometimes that can be kind of tricky. And then these monitors, they go inside a little PVC pipe or a chunk of pipe that we have, and then we bolt that onto the steel post, which sometimes when you're trying to put that burr on the nut or the nut on the bolt, you got your arm down in that 55-60 degree water, and it can be kind of painful. So you got to be pretty quick with that, because the longer it takes you, the harder it's going to be. Your hand gets so cold. So that's usually a good indication that we're going to have some cold water. But usually we're out there, I think we put them out usually in early April and usually pull them out about mid-October. The main thing is like Hunter said, that maintaining that temperature. So whether it's 60-degree days in May and October, or 80, 90, 100-degree days in August, we compare that air temperature to the water temperature, and if we can maintain that happy trout zone in there. I know the colder the water, for instance, the brook trout like the coldest water. Brown trout can survive in a little bit warmer water. I mean, they'll be all right, but usually it's that coldest water that we're really looking for the brook trout.
Well, and what's really cool about the water temperature too, and I remember when we went out to I think it was Mullins Creek, we did electrofishing survey out there to see what was kind of out there and whatnot, and mainly, I mean, we weren't necessarily looking for the trout, we were looking for the prey species more so, and we only found like two species of minnows, and I don't remember exactly what they were off the top of my head, and we were kind of like distraught, we're like, man, there's nothing out here, and the fisher's like, no, this is a good thing. Being there's only these two species, it indicates that it's a high quality stream, and that these two minnows are able to sustain or be able to live in this stream is good, and that some of these other minnow species that maybe could get in these lower quality streams, warmer temperature waters, would then be able to survive. But since we just found those two, that was a really good thing. So we were thinking it was bad. The fisheries were jumping up and down saying it was a good thing, and obviously it leads down to a road of success later down the road. But
Well, that macroinvertebrate study, and I've talked about before that that training is called, the acronym is SWIM, but it's like a 3-day course out in Western Iowa where we actually get into the stream. So one of the outdoor activities is we go out and we got these little nets and collection boxes. So we're out there, especially you turn the rocks over, you got all kind of creepy crawlers under there. There's a lot of different insects that have a stage of their life is in the water as larvae, and a lot of like the small snails and some of that kind of stuff. So that goes into a list of species. So if we're finding a lot of those macroinvertebrates, that's another food source for not only the trout but the minnows that the trout might feed upon. So when we have that listing, we that's all categorized too as far as the quality. It gets a number rating too. So and we'll do that. It's kind of like when we do the fish shocking, we'll do segments. I can't remember if we do a full 500-foot segment, but when we're doing the fish shocking, we'll do typically 3 segments of 500 feet, and they can be consecutive, but each of those 500 feet we're doing a count. And it's kind of similar like with the macroinvertebrate study. We're going in there. So that's where a lot of the stream condition, and we'll do that with the Rascal assessment, where we're actually looking more at the physical attributes of the stream. But the macroinvertebrates, the different species and things. I was going to say the condition of the stream. If we've got a lot of sediment in the bottom of the stream, it's really difficult for a lot of these creatures to live. Like speaking of the couple minnows that we had in that one, if you've got an embedded sediment-ridden substrate on here, you're not going to be able to have those creatures growing on the rocks and things like that, and you're not going to have the species of aquatic vegetation where a lot of this stuff lives too. Because it's kind of fun. You take you take one of these nets and you like stick it right under some of these overhangs of grass and kind of shake it up, and you lift it up and you find all these interesting little things. And we're actually, you get right down to, you can have a microscope, like a little eyeglass, to look at some of these things. Some of them are pretty small, some of them are bigger, but it's kind of like a little game. You go out there and you've got all these different species, and you're trying to identify them by how many legs they have, or the body shape, color, just how they act. They got these little whirly jig bugs that like spin around and stuff. I mean, so it's kind of fun. I know when we're having that class, everyone wants to like find this species of bug that nobody found that day. Usually somebody comes up with it, so that's kind of interesting. But yeah, so we've gone through in especially in Silver Creek, Minor Creek, and Mullen Creek, the subwatersheds of my watershed project. We've done that macroinvertebrate study, and that helped. What we'll talk about a little bit later is the reintroduction of brook trout. But some of those parameters that we're checking, and just the condition of the stream. So the more stuff we find out there, the higher quality it is.
and what's really cool is when you kind of put the whole picture together and talk about like real life. I mean, those trout fishermen out there, and specifically fly fishermen, I mean, those guys really hone in on those macroinvertebrate and the bugs in the stream because that's what they're using to catch them with. They're using those small flies, and there's different bugs or fly. I mean, whatever. I don't even know the
Mm-hmm.
whole spectrum of lures or whatever you could call them or flies. But those guys are getting down to the nitty gritty. There's certain ones they use at certain times, and if Sam Franzen was still here, um, we'd get him on here because he was an avid fly fisherman and he could go out there almost every night and catch a couple nice, really pretty brook trout, brown trout, whatever it may be. But they really dialed in exactly what they were using based on what the trout were eating, and it's just like anything else. If you're a fisherman, is you get out there, you start to catch some fish. A lot of times they'll regurgitate what they've been eating, and you can see right there what they're eating. You can find the color, you can find the shape, you can find the size, and you kind of match it up. Especially guys who pull like plugs or rapalas, whatever it is, they can pretty much match it to exactly what those fish are eating, and boom, they're on it right then and there. And it's the same exact deal with the macroinvertebrates. Those macroinvertebrates that we're finding, they're larger vertebrates. That's why it's macro, and then they're able to match it to what these flies or lures look like, and that's how they're able to then go out and catch these fish, which is really cool seeing it kind of whole picture go around. I mean, we're using it for the surveying and the data part of it, and then these fishermen are using it for real life to go catch the fish and stuff like that. So it's really pretty cool how they all kind of tie it together then in the end. But
You know, in one of our previous episodes when we were talking about our watershed projects, Silver Creek, obviously our impairment was bacteria, so we were like working on that. We weren't really thinking about the fisheries and stuff, but the individual that used to work at the Decor Fisheries, Bill Kalishik, he was an amazing guy, and his looking to the future and just seeing what we were doing with the stream, and he remembered the history of the stream and how there had been trout in there, and they had actually used it. I believe they would like release trout, and then they'd have school children come out and do some fishing and stuff. So he kind of brought that up. And another individual that lived in our community was Fran Liebert, and he was very active in the wildlife club and Trout Unlimited and things like that. And he was really, he's no longer with us, but man, he was really someone that I looked up to as far as like the advice on the trout stream and things. So he got me excited, and then of course Bill did too. So that's why we started setting these temperature monitors, and we kind of strategically located them around the watershed so that we were like catching those main branches just to document that. And like I said, Mullen Creek we knew was going to be cold. Silver Creek's main branch, and then Minor Creek, which comes in out of the north branch into Silver Creek. But I remember we had to relocate after the first year. We set a couple monitors, and like Hunter was saying, you want to make sure that you maintain that water level. Well, Silver Creek is what we consider a disappearing stream. So we'll back up on that. The reason we've got these streams in Northeast Iowa is because we are in that driftless region where we've got a lot of karst topography, a lot of spring water. That's where our cold water comes from, is the springs. So that's the unique part of Northeast Iowa, that we have these streams. So we strategically place these, but the one spot we happen to have it dried up, and like Hunter said, you come back and it's sitting in dry ground. And you look at your readings, you know exactly when the water level dropped, because all of a sudden you're going from 55, 60, 65 degrees to 87 degrees, and we know that that's the end of that. Also, the other kind of funny thing is, if we're ever wondering what the date is that we pull the monitors out, and then once we pull them out, we usually bring them in the office, and they're usually 72 degrees that day. So if we forgot what day we pulled them out, we're pretty sure knowing when we got them back in. And then as far as pulling them out, it was kind of a funny story here 2-3 years ago. Sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. So we had set this, and I was always kind of worried because we were looking for that optimum spot, and we were usually back by this tree, but that kind of silted in, and that wasn't really a good spot anymore. Because we also like to kind of have it tether them to something, whether it's another post up on the bank or a tree or a fence or something like that. So anyway, we moved it down. Thought, oh wow, this is a great little stretch. It's kind of narrow and good 12 inches, 18 inches deep. And lo and behold, we come back to pull out our monitor, and the beavers had moved in, built this huge dam. Now we could just see the tip of our fence post. Hunter's going out there trying to reach it. He's getting right to the top of his waders, and we're like, oh man, what are we gonna do? So we ran back to town, went to the hardware store, and got a pickaxe, and thinking we were just gonna demolish this beaver dam. And man, I don't know what school they went to and what architectural school or engineering school they go to, but man, they know how to build dams. And it was just like scratching on a hard surface trying to get a, we just gnawed through a little area we just wanted to lower it enough so we could reach down to grab it. So it was on a Friday. So we cut down on that beaver dam, and man, did we upset the beavers because they went to town that weekend. We came back on Monday and they had built it even bigger and taller than what was before. So we eventually were able to latch onto the post and just pull it out with a four-wheeler. But anyway, so we had a little bit too much of a good team that time. But like Hunter said, we want to keep that. We want to make sure that we're getting that full season of data. And so location. We want to make sure that we're putting those in good spots and marking them well too, because over from the time the spring when we set them out to during summer to the fall, we come back and things grow up and different stuff like that. So we usually mark them pretty good. So once in a while, people see these posts out there. And now we've got a lath, we've got orange paint and flags and ribbon and stuff. So that's primarily what we're doing. Another funny story is as far as tethering things to things, north of town, I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to put it right on this bridge and hook it to this bridge piling. So we had a chain and stuff on it. And I did not realize that I came back later that summer. I was water sampling. Here the county was putting a new bridge in, pulled the bridge out. There went my temperature monitor and everything. So I'm over here on the pile of debris trying to find my temperature monitor and everything. It was a lost cause. It was gone. So so sometimes we have a fail, but sometimes it's location or the wildlife helps us out, or some building crew comes along and kind of changes our plans. So usually it works out great though.
Yeah, Neil was talking about the location. And I'll kind of just jump right into my watershed project as far as how we decided where we were going to put them, how many we needed, and that sort of thing. And really what we jumped in on is we wanted to make sure we had a monitor, at least one monitor in each tributary, each branch of that watershed area. And so that's how we really dove in and figured out what we had. So I'll just go right down them. I'll give you some numbers here and then we can kind of talk about them. But so Cardinal Creek, which is a tributary that comes in actually from the Winnesheek side into what then would be the main branch of the Turkey River, just north of Cardinal Marsh there. It's a very, very small stream. The spring actually comes out of the side of a hill. And that's an area where you never would think that would keep water flowing through the summer, because when we come in the spring, there's maybe 6 to 8 inches if you're lucky. But what's crazy is that spring is constantly flowing all year round, whether we've gotten rain or not. And so we always keep that flow throughout the year. And so far, we've only had our monitors out in the Turkey River for 2 years. This year will be year number 3, which we haven't quite pulled them yet. Any day now. But anyways, for our 2-year average there is 52 degrees, and so that's staying extremely cold. Obviously, we're really close to the source of the spring. That's keeping those temperatures down. Cheok Creek, which is another smaller tributary that flows into the main branch of the Turkey, actually just west of where Cardinal Creek is right about 55 degrees on average. And so that one's pretty dang cold too. That's actually one of our streams that we found quite a few brown trout in, and even a brook trout doing our electrofishing out there. Stone Creek is another small tributary that kind of comes off. There's about 7 springs that start in a pasture area that actually was what the Vernon Springs area, or Vernon Springs town, was kind of named after. That basically starts the stream, as well as some stormwater that comes off from the city of Cresco. And that's kind of one of our new showcase streams, I guess we could call it, as far as holding trout and stuff like that. And that actually flows in just above the Arch Rapids. If you are familiar with the Mill Pond or Vernon area, it flows in right above there, right kind of next to where the golf course is. And that sits right about that 54 degree on average too. And so some really, really cold stretches right there. Obviously, they're really close to the source of the springs, which helps. But nonetheless, those are some kind of our high priority areas that we're going to look as far as getting them designated cold water, and hopefully see some trout reproduction and possibly brook trout reintroduction or introduction here in the future. The other kind of four spots or three spots that we kind of targeted were the actual main branches of the Turkey River. So like the North Branch, the West Branch, the South Branch, and those all kind of eventually come together into the main branch of the Turkey River that most people are familiar with. These stretches all have similar kind of characteristics. They do have some springs that show up here and there, but for the most part, these are probably going to be warm water segments. On average, we found that they're sitting right around that 65 to 70 degree range on average, which would mean that the maximum temperature throughout those summer months definitely got over the 75 degrees, that 75 degree mark at times. But there is some areas in there that you can see where the water crest is and different things like that. So in the future, it could be possible where we could maybe see some brown trout or rainbow trout in there. Probably not brook trout, just not quite cold enough. But still some pretty nice stretches in there, and they possess some really good habitat and characteristics for game fish. We don't always have to get caught up on the trout aspect and stuff, but some of these smaller tributaries that previously hadn't seen game fish in them, we're starting to see, especially like the smallmouth bass, we're starting to see work up into these tributaries and start spawning and that sort of thing. And so that's really cool to see them coming back from the main branches, find these little sanctuaries that people don't normally think or would think that there'd be fish in, and seeing these populations of smallmouth bass is pretty cool. As far as numbers and cold water and that sort of thing, it's really fun to talk about, but the more exciting topic would be the electrofishing, and actually getting in the streams and seeing what kind of fish or what kind of minnows we actually have in there. And we've mainly done it just on Cheok and Stone Creek, and so we've done kind of three kind of main shockings in 2018, 2020. Now we just did another one here in 2022 at the University of Iowa. But we found a lot of brown trout in both Stone Creek and Cheok Creek. Actually, in 2020, when we were in Cheok, we were kind of on the mission to see if there was any brook trout in there. Back in 2018, we had found one, but we were kind of back on that mission to see if we could find any more or if there was in there. And we came back, found buckets and buckets of brown trout, and still found the elusive one brook trout.
We should have checked the measurement and see how much he grew in those 2 years. I don't know. I don't doubt it was the same one, but I kind of think I'm gonna name him Charlie.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but yeah, that electrofishing is an absolute blast. I mean, we had Doug Houghton up here from Missouri this spring. He kind of did a little news magazine article for us on the furrow, and he actually, I can't remember if it was him or one of his friends, actually has the patent to the electrofishing backpack units. And so it's pretty cool. It basically just hooks up to a small voltage battery. You basically test the conductiveness and different parameters in the stream, which then you know how to set your backpack shocker so that you're obviously not hurting the fish. What it does is basically it tracks them to the wand that you're using, and then you're able to scoop them up. Like Neil talked about, we do shorter segments that you can fill buckets and stuff like that as you go. And then after that 500 foot, take the weight, and the measurements and the length and stuff like that, and then release them right there without affecting the fish at all or hurting them. And so it's a really good and effective way to sample as far as number of fish, species of fish, and then even like with Neil's project, and he'll probably talk about is the genetics of them too. And so that was really important with them, with the brook trout part of it is seeing the genetics and seeing how that's changed in different generations and whatnot. But that electrofishing is really important to us to get actually in the stream and see what we actually got in there. So it kind of gives us that baseline data as far as previous, knowing what we had in there. If this were to work itself down the road as far as introducing some brook trout in the Turkey River area.
I mean, I always look forward to when I hear that they're going to be coming to do that. I'm like, oh wow, that's going to be great. And then we try to round up a few other people. Honestly, I remember doing a tour with Dale Denler's class in the spring. It was probably, I forget what, probably back in 2016 maybe, or 15. I had a tour, and I remember Hunter was in that class, and I remember at the end of the class I said, hey, we're going to be doing a fish shocking, and invited Dale Denler and any of his students that wanted to participate in that. So Bill Kalishik lined it up, and we came out, and our mission was to sample three 500-foot stretches in Mullen Creek, Silver Creek, and Minor Creek. And so, lo and behold, here we showed up, and usually Bill brings his Teresa Shea also works at the fisheries over there in Decorah, so she came along. So Dale came, and there was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6, 6, 7 high school students came with Dale, and we spent that morning for noon. I think we ran probably from 9 until noon or so. Anyway, we only got through 2 segments, or two streams, 3 sets of segments, so we had to come back another day. So I said, hey, if anybody wants to come back, you're more than welcome to. I know you guys had to give up classes and stuff like that. So the next week we had scheduled, and here comes Hunter and Telesti. She came along too, and I said, wow, that's pretty impressive. They actually came back to enjoy doing this, and it just showed to me that they had a lot of interest in our habitat and outdoor stuff. So that was kind of the first time I kind of put a peg on Hunter as being someone that I think would be a good fit with what we do here. But anyway, it's not just the trout we're looking for. It's like we were saying earlier, it's all the species, the minnows, and that's one thing. It's like you used to stand on a bridge and you look inside and you see all these little tiny minnows flying. I'm like, minnow is a minnow. It's like, oh no. You would not believe how many different species of minnows there are. What blows my mind is watching Teresa and Bill and Mike and them guys identify these. I mean, they get right down to like a little shading under their gill patch. I mean, it's funny. There's one that's called a stickleback, and it honestly looks like a little walleye. It's just the coolest little fish. Then there's that one. It's almost like a really colorful one that they really rainbow darter. Oh my gosh, that is like, it looks like a little tropical fish. You'd think we got something pulled out of the when you're down at the Cayman Islands or something. Just gorgeous, and it's actually something that the trout really like. It's an indicator species of really high quality water. So we get excited when we see a trout, but these people that are really into the fisheries, they get excited about some of these individual species of minnows. And then also back to the macroinvertebrate studies, that's another thing we did. Jackie Gouch, Iowa DNR, they are definitely an amazing partner with us on our watershed projects, especially the stream aspect of what we're doing. They appreciate what we're doing on the uplands, so that helps out the streams. But Jackie came up and we did that macroinvertebrate study, and I don't know, Hunter, that was probably one of your first years that you were with us that summer. And so that's always fun too. But what I would like to do is we have the documentation of that back when we did it, probably back in 2016, 17. I'd like to compare that to where we're at today, and with the improvements and things we've done in the stream. So that would be an interesting, we kind of got the benchmark set for that initial time we did it, and now to go back, because honestly, you stand, and I'm always, we go out and water sample, and I pull the water sample, and then Hunter's busy with all the different tests and stuff. So I go back, and he's probably wondering, what are you doing over there? I'm just looking in the stream. It's just fun to see all that different vegetation, and just to see the structure of the stream and how it's evolved and changed from, not in a pretty quick amount of time. 13 years is when Silver Creek was first project began, and seeing some of the improvements that we've got now. And honestly, that was a big part of Silver Creek and the reintroduction of brook trout. Was these brook trout were over in Pine Creek in Winneshiek County, and it's the only native trout to Northeast Iowa. So, we always hear about these unfortunate fish kills and different things, that things can happen. Well, when you got a rare species of trout, and they're only in one stream, that's, you kind of worry about, hey, what could happen? So that one summer they were looking for probably 13, 14 other cold water streams that, had to be somewhat high quality. And because we had gathered all this data, we qualified for receiving some of these trout. So they brought that first year, it was in, I believe it was in 2017, they brought 700 fingerlings. And at that time, most of the information we had was on Mullen Creek as far as history of trout, and we had just started the temperature monitoring stuff. So, but we knew for sure that Mullen Creek had it. So we dropped these 700 trout. We divided them up in by pails. It's kind of fun when that comes too. That's about I don't know what's more exciting, the day we spend electric fishing or dropping fingerlings. It always reminds me of when you see when they go out and they collect these little baby turtles and they like release the sea turtles. It's kind of like that. I'm assuming that would be the same feeling you get. So, but anyway, we released them in 2 or 3 different locations on the Yurok property over here on Mullen Creek. So that was pretty exciting. So that was like in May of 2017. So we actually came back. The fisheries wanted to see, well, how are they doing? You know, and I'm like, wow, we had dropped them, and then we had a couple flood events, and I'm like, man, did they all get flushed into the upper Iowa? And which is kind of, that's a whole amazing thing too, is just how fish hang out in some of these high water events. So they came back in 2000. I would believe it'd be like the end of March of 2018, and I think you came back too. I think you were at college yet. I think no, you might have not been. Anyway,
I think it's 2019.
19. Okay, so then, well, this was the first time we did. We came back. You may not have been there. Maybe it was, maybe. Well, anyway,
Who knows?
we do this so much, like sometimes the years just kind of fly by. But anyway, we came back, and it was in March, and here are these little fingerlings, which are usually, I'd say, what, 2.5 inches or so, and about the size of your pinky. And just kind of wondering, I'm kind of sweating. I'm like, gosh, are there any left? Did the herons eat them all, or something like that? And lo and behold, here we were finding these brook trout, and they had grown to 6 to 8 inches, and which impressed our fisheries people too, because obviously they're not going to keep dumping fingerlings into a stream where they're not surviving, and so they had done so well, they put us on schedule again to receive fingerlings that spring. So this time they increased it. I think we got 700 the first time. I think we got like 1,800 or so the next May or June, and so then we release those again. And part of the reason that they keep bringing back the fingerlings year after year is because when they collect these eggs up from the fish in Pine Creek, I mean, obviously you're only collecting so many females collecting their eggs. They go down to Manchester, raise them up to the fingerling size to drop them. So if they do that multiple years, they're getting a wider, a deeper genetic pool of fish. So then they bring those back, so then those can like cross with the ones that we have already. So that's part of their process for restocking, reintroducing these trout too, is to get a deep enough genetic pool. So anyway, they did well. Then the next year was 2019. We had Brett Kelly came up. He was doing a study at Iowa State University, getting his master's in honestly trout migration within the streams. And so we came out and we were doing, I think we did at least 3 different locations on Silver Creek. So the last section we did, we went back to Mullen Creek, and it was in August. You know how the grass is deep, and the Mullen Creek is so neat because it's a very narrow but deep channel. But so then the grasses are up here, so we're kind of like about this level when we're walking.
I'll put a picture if you're able to watch this. Actually, watch the video of it. I'll put actually a picture of what we had to go through, and that was one of those years when that wild cucumber was just
that was wild.
So
and
basically,
some of
the first
different,
2 people going through were the trailblazers, open
through.
it up, and the next 3, 4, 5, 6 guys behind us, can't remember how many we had, were basically sitting there with the nets in the ground, hoping they could catch a few.
Well, with those electric fishers, you've obviously got the individual with the backpack and the wand that is in the water, and they also have it's kind of like a tail. It's kind of like the grounding system. And I know when Teresa, she's like, "Don't step on my tail," and undoubtedly, sometimes I'm not paying attention, I step on it, and they're about to go backwards. But anyway, so then you usually have a couple people with nets, and then someone following behind with a pail. So then we collect the fish and put them in the pail. And also I want to say too that electric fishing doesn't hurt the fish. All it does is lightly stuns them long enough so that we can grab them with our net. And honestly, some of those fish are pretty fast because, man, you miss your one opportunity to grab them and they're just like, boom, right past you. So anyway, we did that shocking. Here we found a fingerling. Well, we didn't release any in that spring of 2019, and here we're in August, and here we have a fingerling. So that was our documentation that they are actually naturally reproducing. So that was pretty exciting. We've got a picture of that, and I've used that on a lot of brochures and posters and things like that. So that's a lot of fun. But anyway, so that's kind of how the reintroduction of trout happened in Silver Creek. So then after that, 2008, back in 2020 and 2021, they came back in that 2021. They brought like over 3,000 that year, and then we split it up and we've actually put some in the main branch of Silver Creek and again in Mullen Creek. But we were also seeing how they were migrating because when we were, we just started in Mullins Creek. So these little fish, they had to like grow and swim all the way down to where that junction was over on Highway 139 east of town, swim back up Silver Creek main branch, and they got all the way up, northwest of Cresco. So they had booked, a good 7-8 miles, and they were just, doing very well. So that was something that Brett was really impressed with too. He's like, well, these fish, they had to have come from that first stocking because of the size and the weights and things we were having. So that was pretty cool to just see how that was. And then they did bring another, I think about 2,000 in 2021. We didn't receive any this year, but I think just with the numbers and how they're doing, I think we're probably due. Well, we did do, like Hunter said, when we had the Furrows magazine individual came up, we did just a small segment there on Silver Creek, and they were doing very well. I know it was, at first I was like, oh man, it's like taking a kid to the doctor when they're sick and they don't have any symptoms. It was like we're getting in the stream, not getting any fish, but I was standing up and you could just see the fish. They were kind of right ahead of Hunter and Teresa, and once we got to a deep pool, they just started pulling them out, and I know the editor from the magazine was pretty excited, so we got some really nice pictures for that too.
And what was cool about that is we found all age classes. I mean, they spawn in the fall, and so we had found a little bit larger than fingerlings. I figure you could call them year one or first year fish that we found that were a little bit bigger than the fingerlings, and then you found fish that were 6-8 inches, and then we found a couple that were over 10 inches, and so we really found probably anywhere from 3 to 4, maybe 5 ages, year classes of fish. And so that's really cool to start to see that these are all starting to reproduce. They're increasing that genetic population, and they're really obviously thriving in these high quality streams. So,
and they're beautiful fish. I mean, we only have them out of the water long enough to get their measurement and their weight. But we always want to have a little photo opportunity with them, so you're kind of holding them in your hand, and they're just a gorgeous fish. I mean, the coloring, I'm sure during the year season they kind of change color a bit too, but between spawning and regular season, but they're a gorgeous fish, and it's just kind of fun. But yeah, our whole electrofishing, I mean, it almost makes you want to not have to go back with a hook and a piece of cheese to try to catch these when it's so easy to do that, but obviously that isn't how it works. But
yeah, so I mean, when we start to really dive in, I mean, obviously the building blocks and the main starting point of all this is getting our temperature monitors in and doing our water quality monitoring and all that kind of stuff to really see what we got for the numbers, documenting the good, the bad, the indifferent, showing that we either can or cannot sustain these healthy trout populations, and then which eventually leads into getting trout in these streams and really taking off from there. And so it's really a multi-step process that we got to get to before we can put those trout in our hands and show them off to the landowners, because ultimately it's always easy to talk about numbers and talk to your blue in the face and bore people with all the data and whatnot, but when you can actually hold that fish in your hand and show landowners and farmers and stuff like that that's what they have on their property, that's pretty cool. I mean, like I said, it's easy to talk about the numbers, but when you can show the fish, that indicates there's high quality streams and high quality practices going on around the watershed area.
So then, like our monitoring, we, obviously, like we've talked about that before. Well, we'll briefly, but we'll probably do a whole episode on all the different things we test for in the stream. But so in Silver Creek, obviously, we had been doing DNR had been water sampling in these streams for years. Obviously, that's how they found the impairment of bacteria in Silver Creek. But since 2000, I would say probably in 2012 is when we got the planning grant. We probably began our water monitoring in 11. So we've been monitoring for the different parameters like phosphates, nitrates, and all that kind of stuff for 12, 13 years plus. But these temperature monitors, Bill Kleshik, we got going on those 9 years ago. So Hunter, I know he's checking on temperature. So that 9-year average of temperature, Silver Creek was 60 degrees, Minor Creek 62, Mullen Creek 56. So obviously these are cold water streams. Mullen is the coldest just because I think of the geography of that and how narrow and deep it is. But those are awesome numbers, and Hunter's got these even his main branch. I mean, I'm kind of impressed at 70 degrees. That's pretty good. 60s and 50s. So that's kind of neat. And not only that, when we're doing that Rascal, we usually do it in August. I mean, some people say do it earlier or later. I like doing it in the summer because we walk in the stream, so we're walking in the water, so we want to be out on nice warm days. But man, you can really tell when you get a stretch that is a cold water stream. I mean, it makes a huge difference. And I know we were doing the North Branch, and where we jumped in, and we're like, oh wow, this is way different. It's like 85 degrees out, and we're walking through, and it's like 56 degree temperature water. So it keeps us moving, that's for sure. But it's very noticeable where those really cool water stretches are.
And I'm trying to remember back. We were at a conference somewhere, listening to a presentation. I'm almost positive Tom Eisenhart from Iowa State was talking about, and I'm not sure if it was they were trying to debate whether you can turn a warm water stream into a cold water stream based on best management practices, cleaning the stream out, getting that cobble, that sort of thing, or if they actually did it. I can't remember. Obviously, it's a big difference whether they actually did it or could they do it.
So part of that, and Hunter alluded to that about that sediment in the bottom of the stream, because there's been debate. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 plus years, but there's trees keep the temperature of the water cool because it shades it. Well, honestly, like we've talked about these trout streams in prairie, I mean, obviously there's grass, but a big part of it is having that substrate free of sediment, because obviously sediment is a dark color. When you get the radiation from the sunlight goes in there, it will actually heat that water up. And also widening of a stream. If it's become eroded so much that it's widened out and shallowed up, you got more exposure to the sun. So honestly, by keeping that stream a little narrower, free of sediment, is one way of keeping those temperatures down. And it'd be kind of interesting to go back and see on those temperatures to see if it's changed, if it's become cooler or what it does, because honestly, with all the buffers and all the work that the landowners have done in the watershed, doing the cover crops and reduced tillage and grass waterways, we're reducing that amount, and the stream bank restorations that we're doing has reduced that amount of sediment, and it's very noticeable now. And it'd be interesting to see that if our average temperature has been cooling down, because I think it probably would.
Your average, I would almost say maybe not, only because it's already so cold, and it would be really hard to draw the conclusion whether or not it's actually been dropping compared to where air temps and stuff where we're like in the Turkey River, you got some temps that are in the 70s, high 60s, and that sort of thing. Might be a little bit easier to tell over time.
I mean, once you've gotten to a certain temperature, it's pretty hard to get any colder. But it's also neat is in the wintertime, just like a cold water stream in the summer stays cool, in the winter it keeps from freezing. So a lot of these cold water streams, that water's from the springs coming out of the side hill and that water temperature is going to be, obviously it's going to probably be colder than 56 when it's 20 below zero out. But a lot of times we'll go out there and you'll see there'll be open places, and that what's really neat is that watercress and some of that stuff is green and growing because it's not freezing. It's staying above 32 degrees. So that's really cool too.
I took a quick peek. We did have some monitors that they were doing a special study as far as using satellites and infrared trying to measure the water temperature and how accurate they were and stuff like that. And so we actually kept some monitors in certain streams over winter, and a lot of those averages on the cold water streams we're around that 35 to 40 degree range in the winter. So obviously most of the time it was going to be warmer than what the air temperature was, which is what keeps it from not freezing. But we did have a couple of those stretches that froze solid through, and the monitors got frozen a block of ice.
I forgot about that. We did that probably 2-3 years ago. It's kind of like the reverse of what we do in the summertime.
So, awesome. Well, we're winding down here. I got a couple questions we're going to test and see how smart Neil Schaefer is. He thinks he's pretty smart. I know he's a pretty smart guy, but I always say he's the smartest dumb guy I know, so we'll see.
I got a lot of trivia in my head. I would probably do pretty well in trivia, Jeopardy or something like that. It's probably useless knowledge, but...
Well, we'll see how useless knowledge this is. So I got 2 questions for him. The first one is, it's kind of a 2-part answer, but I'll just you can just take a one stab at it. Give me a number, see what you think. But how many streams are the Iowa DNR working to sustain native brook trout?
I think it's probably in that 14 to 15.
He's close. The actual number is 19.
Oh, wow.
And I said it's a 2-parter because there's 9 streams that previously, before this project, had populations of brook trout, whether they were naturally there or they had already put them there. And there's actually 10 streams that they're starting out completely fresh, putting these brook trout in. Silver Creek and Mullen Creek, technically being those brand new ones. So 19 total streams in Iowa that the Iowa DNR is working to sustain native brook trout populations.
Excellent.
Second question is, how many fishable, and this is actually documented on the DNR website. Obviously there's probably more undocumented ones, but how many fishable trout streams are there in Iowa?
Well, this is one thing I wanted to bring this up.
Here comes the politician answer.
Hey, no, I am ragging up our farmers and our fisheries in Iowa. Is that, years ago, we had a very few number of trout streams in Iowa, and they have been just on the steady incline as far as the work that's been done on the streams, further documentation of the streams, and the reintroduction of trout, whether it's brown trout or brook trout. So that number is increased. And I don't know if you've got those numbers on handy, but maybe we'll have that on a future episode. But I do know it has increased, and that's always kind of fun to see. So back to your question, number of fishable trout streams in Iowa. Oh, golly.
It's 2 digits, I'll say that.
Yeah, I know it's going to be 2 digits. I'm going to say probably... it's going to be a lot more than 40 years ago, but I would say maybe 35.
Not even close.
Oh, that's way more.
77.
Oh, man.
77.
See, wow. That's awesome. That's pretty cool.
And honestly, they were talking about it. There's over 100 actual fishable trout streams, but not all of them are documented. So, like, you could say, like, the Stone Creek, the Cheok Creek, Silver Creek, Minor Creek, Mullen Creek. There's 5 right there that aren't documented on the DNR's website.
Well, yeah, that's another cool thing is because everybody's heard of Beock Creek. That was the first watershed project on a trout stream in Howard County back in the late 90s. They did that, and they stocked that, and that's a very popular place to go. It's really neat. I actually just walked it the other day with our wetland specialist Ben Kennan, and we went back to where the actual spring on that is, because that's one of those disappearing streams. There's no water above, but then you get down to the bridge and you got a nice flow of water. But yeah, the number of trout streams have increased, and that has a lot to speak for the amount of conservation that the farmers in Iowa have been doing, and the work that the Iowa DNR fisheries have been doing in these watershed projects, and just the focus on it. Because honestly, well, like Stone Creek, we had no clue that there were trout in there. We didn't even have an idea what the temperature was. When we went out there that first time, I'm like, okay, this doesn't look like much there. But like Hunter said, we've done these fish shockings in 4 or 5 inches of water, and there's a little trout coming up in all those rocks. So the more documentation that we're doing, the more that we study these, the more rascal assessments we do in identifying, especially with these temperature monitors, we're going to find these jewels in the prairie. We've got this series of posters that they put out several years ago, and they called Jewels of the Prairie. And what they really need to do is put a Jewels of the Prairie with these trout on it also, especially the brook trout. That's just a cool thing. And like I said, it's a reflection on the quality of the stream, but the quality of the stream is reflective upon what the upland treatments are. And I have mentioned that before. Like I said, my watershed project had no desire or interest, or not interest, but no plan to be doing a lot of work in the stream itself. It was all upland practices that we were going to install to improve the water quality. But a lot of the stuff is multi-purpose, and the improvements have just been increasing with the filter strips and all that kind of stuff. So it is a testament to, a lot of times people get down on the quality of water in Iowa. A lot of times we go to these watershed conferences and they'll have a session and talking about surveys they do of the people that live in the watershed. They usually have kind of a negative thought about what the quality of water is in Iowa, which there is a lot of room for improvement, but there are some really good success stories and some really good work that's been going on. And we do have these jewels in the prairie, and it's a privilege to get to work with the people. And what's even cooler is I know when we go out and we like Hunter said, you can listen to all the data that we collect from our monitoring of parameters and stuff. But when you're holding a fish and you can see that, but what's really enjoyable is the landowners and seeing, and they've been pulling a few trout out, fishing on their own property. But just the pride that the people have that have these stretches of cold water stream in their properties, which it's just a great asset. And what we're doing is we're helping people help the land and help their streams, and hopefully for many generations to come, and we'll keep those trout around, and hopefully we'll never have a 40-year absence like we did in the past. So
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're gonna wind down here, and before we sign off, I'm just gonna give a mention. Next week we'll have our first guest on camera with Tim Sadler from Reichsview Farms, and we're still working. Hopefully we can get his comrade Isaac Hover on here as well, and kind of talk about their operations and what they do, and how Reichsview is helping families feed families is what their kind of motto is. And so, if you guys got any questions, send them on over to us that we can present to them and kind of work through. And we're just going to have some nice conversations and kind of see how they've been working and what they kind of do over there at Reichsview Farms. So we're going to sign off here with episode 6 of Beyond the Dirt podcast.